When the billionaire who abandoned you 12 years ago walks into your restaurant, sits down like a stranger, and pretends he doesn't recognize you, do you spit in his champagne or demand answers? That's the choice Lena Brooks faced the night her past collided with her present, and what happened next tore open secrets that had been buried for over a decade. Some promises are meant to be broken. Some disappearances hide unforgivable truths. And some love stories don't get second chances. They get reckonings. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The dinner rush hit Rosewoods like a tidal wave at 7:15, exactly when Lena Brooks didn't need it to. She was already running on 4 hours of sleep, her lower back screaming from the double shift she'd pulled the day before, and her mother's latest hospital bill was folded in her apron pocket like a lead weight she couldn't put down. The paper crinkled every time she moved, a constant reminder that she was exactly $347 short of keeping the lights on this month. "Table 12 needs water," Marcus called from behind the bar, not looking up from the martini he was shaking. "And table 6 wants to know if the halibut is line-caught or farm-raised, like they're gonna fly to Alaska to verify." Lena grabbed the water pitcher, ignoring the way her wrist ached. "Tell them it's line caught by a third-generation fisherman who sings to the fish before he pulls them up. They'll love that." "You're making that up. They don't know that." This was Rosewoods on a Friday night in downtown Philadelphia. White tablecloths, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than Lena's car, and clientele who spent more on a single bottle of wine than she made in a week. She'd been working here for 3 years, ever since her mother's diagnosis had turned their lives into a careful choreography of medical appointments, insurance denials, and survival. Before that, she'd had plans. Dreams, even. A bakery of her own, shelves lined with sourdough and chocolate croissants. A small space where people could sit and feel like the world wasn't constantly trying to grind them down. Now she had an apartment that smelled like mildew, a refrigerator held shut with duct tape, and a smile she painted on every night because tips paid better when you looked like you weren't drowning. "Lena, VIP section," Rachel hissed, appearing at her elbow with wide eyes and 2 menus clutched against her chest. "Table 19, some big real estate group. James said to give them the full treatment. They're talking about a potential event contract." Lena glanced toward the VIP section, a roped-off area near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. The table was already occupied by 4 people in expensive suits, the kind of polished, powerful look that made her feel invisible, even when she was standing right in front of them. "I've got table 12. I'll cover it. James specifically asked for you." Rachel's expression softened. "You're good with the rich ones. You don't look like you want to stab them." "I definitely want to stab them." "Yeah, but you don't look like it. That's the important part." Lena took the menus, smoothed down her apron, and headed toward table 19. The crowd was thick tonight, a Friday evening blur of laughter and clinking glasses, and conversations that all seemed to blend together into white noise. She'd gotten good at tuning it out, at moving through rooms full of people without really seeing them. It was easier that way, safer. She was 3 steps from the table when she saw him. The world didn't stop. That's the thing they get wrong in movies. Time doesn't freeze. Your heart doesn't skip a beat. Violins don't swell in the background. What actually happens is that everything keeps moving exactly the way it was, except suddenly, you're not part of it anymore. You're watching yourself from somewhere outside your body, watching your hand reach for the edge of a table to steady yourself, watching your lungs forget how to pull in air. Ethan Cole was sitting at table 19. 12 years. 12 years since she'd last seen him, since the night he'd kissed her outside her dorm room and promised he'd call her tomorrow, promised they'd figure everything out together, promised her a future that had evaporated like smoke the moment he walked away. 12 years since she'd stopped checking her phone every 5 minutes, since she'd finally accepted that whatever they'd had, whatever she'd thought they'd had, was gone. And now he was here, right here. 20 feet away, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her rent, his dark hair shorter than she remembered but still with that slight wave that used to fall across his forehead. He looked older, sharper, like someone had taken the boys she'd known and carved away everything soft until only edges remained. He was talking to a woman in a cream blazer, gesturing with one hand while the other rested on the table, and he looked comfortable, confident, like a man who belonged in rooms like this, who'd never had to choose between groceries and electricity, who'd never disappeared on someone without explanation and then just existed somewhere else, living a whole different life. Lena's feet had stopped moving. She was standing in the middle of the dining room, menus clutched in her hands, staring at a ghost. He hadn't seen her yet. Or, no. Wait. His eyes flickered toward her for half a second, passed over her face without recognition, and returned to the woman he was speaking to. He'd looked right at her and seen nothing. Something hot and vicious coiled in Lena's chest. She forced her legs to move, forced herself to cross the remaining distance to the table, forced her face into the pleasant blank expression she'd perfected over 3 years of serving people who didn't bother to learn her name. "Good evening," she said, her voice coming out steady, even though her pulse was slamming against her ribs. "Welcome to Rosewoods. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The woman in the cream blazer smiled up at her. "I'll have a glass of the Chablis, please." The man across from her, older, silver-haired, with the kind of tan that came from vacation homes in warm climates, ordered a scotch. Neat. The third man, younger and nervous-looking, asked for sparkling water. And then Ethan spoke, and hearing his voice again after 12 years felt like touching a live wire. "Bourbon? Rocks? Whatever you've got that's decent." He still wasn't looking at her. His gaze was fixed on the menu in front of him, casual, disinterested, like she was part of the furniture. Lena's hand tightened around her order pad. "I'll get those right out for you." She turned and walked away before her composure could crack, before the trembling in her hands could become visible, before she could do something monumentally stupid, like demand to know why he was here, why he'd looked at her like she was a stranger, why he'd— "You okay?" Marcus asked when she reached the bar. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine." She set down her order pad, carefully, precisely, like it might shatter if she wasn't careful. "I need a Chablis, a Glenlivet neat, sparkling water, and a bourbon on rocks." "Which bourbon?" "The good stuff." Marcus raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. Lena leaned against the bar, focusing on her breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Her mother's nurse had taught her that, back when the panic attacks had been bad, before she'd learned to shove everything down deep enough that it couldn't surface during working hours. He was here. Ethan Cole was sitting in a restaurant, acting like she didn't exist, and she had to bring him his bourbon and smile and be professional because she needed this job. She needed the tips. She needed to not fall apart in front of a room full of strangers. She needed— "Lena!" She looked up. Rachel was standing next to her, concern creasing her forehead. "What?" "You've been staring at the wall for like 30 seconds. You sure you're okay?" "Yeah, just tired." "You want me to take table 19? For a moment, Lena actually considered it. Considered letting Rachel handle the VIP table, disappearing into the kitchen, maybe even claiming she was sick and leaving early. It would be easy, smart even. But then she thought about the hospital bill in her pocket, about the way her mother had looked that morning when Lena had helped her out of bed, fragile, exhausted, trying to hide how much pain she was in. She thought about the eviction notice that had shown up last week, about the collection calls she'd been dodging, about all the ways her life had narrowed down to a single grinding necessity: survive. She couldn't afford to walk away from a VIP table. Not tonight, not ever. "I'm good," Lena said. "Thanks." Marcus slid the drinks across the bar. She loaded them onto a tray and headed back across the dining room, past the couples celebrating anniversaries and the business dinners, and the groups of friends who could afford to split a $100 bottle of wine without thinking twice about it. Ethan was laughing when she reached the table. A low, genuine sound that she'd almost forgotten. The woman in the cream blazer had said something amusing, apparently, and he was smiling at her with an easiness that made Lena's stomach twist. She distributed the drinks, setting each one down with practiced precision. "Have you had a chance to look at the menu, or would you like a few more minutes?" The silver-haired man, clearly the one in charge, glanced up at her. "What do you recommend? We're celebrating tonight. Big acquisition just closed." Lena launched into her usual script, describing the chef's specials with the kind of enthusiasm that made people think she actually cared whether they ordered the sea bass or the filet mignon. The whole time she was hyper-aware of Ethan sitting 18 inches to her left, silent, still not looking at her. When she finished, the silver-haired man nodded approvingly. "We'll do the tasting menu for the table, and another round of drinks." "Excellent choice." Lena collected the menus, her movements automatic. "I'll put that in for you right away." She was turning to leave when Ethan's voice stopped her. "Excuse me?" Every muscle in her body locked. She turned back slowly, her face carefully neutral. Ethan was looking directly at her now, his expression unreadable. Up close, she could see the changes 12 years had carved into him. The faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the sharper angle of his jaw, the way he held himself with a stillness that felt deliberate, controlled. "Yes?" she said. "Do you have the time?" The question was so ordinary, so mundane, that for a moment she just stared at him. The other people at the table were already back to their conversation, not paying attention. Lena glanced at her watch. 8:40. "Thanks?" That was it. He turned back to his companions, dismissing her, and she was left standing there with her tray of empty glasses and a rage so sudden and fierce it took her breath away. She walked back to the kitchen in a daze, barely seeing where she was going. Her hands were shaking when she set down the tray. He'd asked her for the time, like she was nobody. Like they hadn't spent 2 years wrapped up in each other, like he hadn't told her he loved her in the parking lot of that terrible diner they used to go to at 3 in the morning, like he hadn't been the first person to make her believe she could want something more than just getting by. "Hey!" Lena looked up. Marcus was watching her from the doorway, his expression serious now. "You really don't look okay." "I'm fine." "That's the third time you've said that, and it's getting less convincing." He hesitated. "You want to talk about it?" "No." She didn't want to talk about it. She wanted to march back out there and dump a pitcher of ice water over Ethan Cole's expensive suit. She wanted to demand answers. She wanted to understand how someone could look at another person they'd once loved and see absolutely nothing. But she couldn't do any of those things because she was a waitress at an upscale Philadelphia restaurant and he was a billionaire dining with investors, and that was the reality of their lives now. Whatever they'd been to each other 12 years ago didn't matter. It hadn't mattered then, when he'd disappeared. It didn't matter now. The rest of the service blurred together. Lena brought out the courses, described each dish with mechanical precision, refilled drinks, cleared plates. The other people at the table were easy to read. The silver-haired man liked to talk about himself. The woman in the cream blazer was sharp and asked good questions. The nervous younger man mostly stayed quiet. Ethan remained an enigma. He participated in the conversation, occasionally made a comment that made the others laugh, but there was a distance to him that Lena couldn't quite define. He ate like someone who'd learned to appreciate good food but didn't need it, drank like someone who'd stopped finding comfort in alcohol years ago. And he still didn't look at her, not really. His gaze would pass over her when she approached the table, register her presence the way you'd register a chair or a painting on the wall, and then move on. By the time she brought out dessert, a chocolate torte with gold leaf, because apparently that's what you served people who closed big acquisitions, Lena had built a careful wall around the part of her that wanted to scream. She was good at that. Good at compartmentalizing, at shoving down feelings until they were small and manageable and couldn't interfere with what needed to be done. "Will there be anything else?" she asked after setting down the final plate. The silver-haired man shook his head, already reaching for his wallet. "Just the check. This has been excellent, thank you. I'll bring that right out." She processed the payment, added a service charge that made her stomach hurt with how much money these people spent without blinking, and returned to the table with the receipt. "Thank you for dining with us tonight," she said, the words automatic. "We hope to see you again soon." They were already standing, gathering their things, the meal forgotten as they moved on to whatever came next in their gilded lives. Lena stepped back to give them space, ready to clear the table and move on to her next customers. Ethan was the last one to stand. He buttoned his suit jacket with one hand, said something to the woman in the cream blazer that made her laugh, and then he stopped, turned, looked directly at Lena, and this time she saw the recognition in his eyes. She saw it, clear and unmistakable, and she saw the moment he decided to acknowledge it. "Lena Brooks," he said quietly. The name hung in the air between them. The other people from his table had already moved toward the exit, not noticing that he'd stopped. The restaurant noise continued around them, conversations, laughter, the clink of silverware on plates, but in that moment, it all felt very far away. Lena's throat was tight. "You remember?" It wasn't a question. "I recognized you the moment I walked in." His voice was low, pitched for her ears only. "I've been trying to figure out what to say for the last 2 hours. Something cracked inside her chest. "How about hello?" Or, sorry, I disappeared without a word 12 years ago and never bothered to explain why. That would have been a good start. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Can we talk? Not here. Tomorrow. I can explain. Explain what? Where you've been? What happened? The words were tumbling out now, the wall she'd built starting to crumble. Do you have any idea what... Ethan, you coming? The silver-haired man had paused near the door, looking back. Ethan raised a hand. 1 minute. He turned back to Lena, and the intensity in his gaze made her want to step back. Please, tomorrow. One conversation, that's all I'm asking. Why should I? Because you deserve answers. Because I should have given them to you 12 years ago. He pulled a business card from his pocket, held it out to her. My office. 2 o'clock. If you don't show up, I'll understand, but I'm hoping you will. Lena stared at the card. Thick paper, embossed lettering. Ethan Cole, CEO. Cole Architecture and Development, CEO. Of course he was. She took the card, her fingers brushing his for a fraction of a second. The contact felt electric, wrong, like touching something she'd locked away years ago. I have to go, Ethan said. But Lena, I'm sorry, for all of it. He left before she could respond, striding across the restaurant to join his colleagues. Lena watched him go, the business card clenched in her fist. Marcus appeared at her elbow. Who was that? Nobody, Lena said. Just nobody. But her hands were still shaking when she cleared the table, and the business card stayed in her pocket for the rest of her shift, a small rectangle of possibility that felt impossibly heavy. Chet. She didn't sleep that night. Lena lay in her narrow bed in the apartment she shared with her mother, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of some country she'd never visit, and replayed the evening over and over in her mind. I recognized you the moment I walked in. Why hadn't he said anything? Why sit there for 2 hours pretending she was invisible if he'd known who she was from the start? Was this some kind of game to him? Some test she'd failed without knowing she was taking it? At 3 a.m, she got up and went to the kitchen. The apartment was silent except for the drip of the leaky faucet she kept meaning to fix, and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Lena made tea she didn't want, then stood at the window and looked out at the city. Philadelphia at night was all light and shadow, buildings stacked against the sky. Lives layered on top of each other in apartments and condos and houses she'd never be able to afford. Somewhere out there, Ethan Cole was probably sleeping in a penthouse or a mansion or whatever billionaire architects lived in. Somewhere out there, he'd built a whole life she knew nothing about. She pulled his business card from where she'd left it on the counter, studied the address. His office was downtown, in one of those glass towers that reflected the sun like a mirror. She could go, show up at 2 o'clock tomorrow, today, technically, and demand the explanation he'd offered. Or she could throw the card away and never think about him again. Except that wasn't true. She'd been thinking about him for 12 years. The not knowing had carved out a hollow space inside her that had never quite filled in, a question mark that had colored every relationship she'd tried to have since. She'd dated other people, of course, had a couple of almost serious boyfriends who'd eventually gotten tired of competing with a ghost, but none of them had ever felt... Lena cut off that thought. No, she wasn't doing this. She wasn't going to romanticize what she'd had with Ethan, wasn't going to turn it into some grand lost love story. They'd been kids, young and stupid and convinced that feeling strongly about something was the same as it being real. He'd left. That was the truth that mattered. Whatever his reasons, whatever explanation he had prepared, he'd made a choice 12 years ago, and she'd been living with the consequences ever since. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a text from her mother's night nurse. Everything okay here? She's sleeping peacefully. Don't worry. Lena sent back a thank you, then stood there holding her phone, the business card still in her other hand. The smart thing would be to ignore it, to protect herself, to not reopen old wounds that had taken years to scab over. The smart thing would be to accept that some doors closed for good reasons, and trying to pry them open again only got you hurt. But she'd never been particularly good at doing the smart thing. Lena told herself she wasn't going to go. She told herself that through her morning shift at the diner, yes, she worked at 2 different restaurants because one job had never been quite enough to cover everything. She told herself that while she stopped by the hospital to check on her mother, sitting beside the bed, and holding her hand while her mom drifted in and out of a medication-induced sleep. She told herself that on the bus ride downtown, her waitressing uniform stuffed in her bag and her nicest dress, which wasn't saying much, feeling hopelessly inadequate for wherever she was going. The Cole Architecture and Development Building was everything she'd expected. Sleek, modern, intimidating. The lobby had marble floors and a receptionist who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Lena felt every thread of her cheap dress as she walked up to the desk. "I have a 2 o'clock appointment with Ethan Cole." The receptionist's smile didn't waver, but Lena saw the quick assessment in her eyes, the mental calculation of whether she belonged here. "Name?" "Lena Brooks." A few keyboard clicks. "Ah, yes. Mr. Cole is expecting you. Take the elevator to the 23rd floor. His assistant will meet you there." The elevator was glass-walled, offering a view of the city as it climbed. Lena watched Philadelphia spread out below her. The grid of streets, the distant gleam of the river, the neighborhood she knew by heart getting smaller and smaller until they were just patterns of light and shadow. The 23rd floor was all glass and steel and quiet money. Ethan's assistant, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense air, greeted her with a smile that seemed genuine. "Miss Brooks? I'm Patricia. Mr. Cole is just finishing a call. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." Patricia led her to a waiting area with chairs that probably cost more than Lena's car, and offered her a selection of magazines she had no interest in reading. Lena sat down, her hands folded in her lap, and tried not to think about the fact that she could still leave, that she could walk out right now and never look back. "Lena." She looked up. Ethan was standing in the doorway to what was presumably his office, and seeing him here, in his own space, on his own territory, was different than seeing him at the restaurant. He'd taken off his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and the casualness of it somehow made him seem more real and more distant at the same time. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I wasn't sure you would." Lena stood, her back straight. "I almost didn't." "I wouldn't have blamed you." He gestured toward his office. "Please." She walked past him into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view that probably never got old if you were the kind of person who worked in places like this. The space was tastefully furnished, dark wood desk, leather chairs, architectural models displayed on shelves, but it didn't feel cold. There was a child's drawing tacked to one wall, bright crayon colors depicting what might have been a building or possibly a dinosaur. Ethan saw her looking at it. "My son," he said quietly. "He's 6. Wants to be an architect like his dad, or a paleontologist, depending on what day you ask him." Lena turned to face him, something sharp twisting in her chest. "You have a son." "Yeah." He moved to stand by the window, not quite looking at her. "His name is Noah. His mother passed away 3 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry." "So am I." He was quiet for a moment. "She was a good person. We weren't in love, we both knew that, but she was kind and smart and a better mother than I probably deserved to give Noah." Lena didn't know what to say to that. She stayed standing in the middle of the office, her arms crossed, waiting. Ethan seemed to pull himself back from wherever his thoughts had taken him. "Please, sit down. I know you probably have questions. Why did you leave?" The words came out harder than she'd intended. Ethan's expression flickered. Pain, maybe, or regret. But he didn't look away. "My father," he said simply. "He found out about us. Found out I was serious about you, that I was planning—" He stopped, shook his head. "He made it very clear that if I didn't end things, he'd make sure you paid the price." Lena felt the room tilt slightly. "What?" "Your scholarship, your family's financial aid applications, the grants your mother was counting on for her treatment." Ethan's voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reciting facts that didn't hurt anymore. He had connections everywhere. He could have made it all disappear, and he would have, just to prove a point. "So you just, what? Walked away to protect me?" The anger in her voice surprised her. "Without telling me? Without giving me a choice?" "I was 20 years old and terrified." Ethan finally looked at her, and the raw honesty in his eyes made her breath catch. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if I disappeared, if I made a clean break, he'd leave you alone. And he did. But I know now that I should have. I should have at least told you why. Given you that much. Lena sank into one of the leather chairs, her legs suddenly unsteady. Your father did this. My father did a lot of things. Ethan's jaw tightened. He controlled everything about my life for years. Where I went to school, who I could see, what career path I'd follow. You were the first thing I'd ever chosen for myself, and he couldn't stand it. So what changed? Why are you here now? He's dead. Heart attack 2 years ago. And before you ask, no, I didn't mourn him. I mourned the father he could have been, but never was. Ethan moved away from the window, pacing now. After he died, I started going through his files. The business records, the investments, all the deals he'd made over the years. And I found something. He went to his desk, pulled out a folder, and handed it to her. Lena opened it slowly. Inside were documents, contracts, investment agreements, letters written in her mother's handwriting from decades ago. She recognized the signature. What is this? Your mother's family and mine were connected through a business partnership that goes back 40 years, Ethan said. My grandfather and your grandfather started a development company together. When it dissolved, there were assets that were supposed to be divided. Your family's share was put into a trust. Lena looked up at him, not understanding. A trust? That my father controlled and never told anyone about. Ethan's expression was grim. He let your family struggle for years, through your mother's diagnosis, through everything, while sitting on money that was rightfully yours. The papers in Lena's hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. How much? Enough to fund your mother's treatment at the best facilities in the country. Enough to start the bakery. I remember you used to talk about. He paused. Enough to never have to work 2 jobs just to survive. Lena couldn't breathe. Why are you telling me this? Because it's yours. It was always yours. My father had no right to keep it from you, and I'm not going to make the same mistake. Ethan sat down across from her, and for the first time since she'd walked into his office, he looked uncertain. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know the truth. All of it. She stared at him, at this man who'd been a boy she'd loved, who'd disappeared and become someone powerful and complicated and completely foreign to her. There were 1,000 questions she wanted to ask, 1,000 accusations she wanted to hurl at him. Instead, what came out was, do you have any idea what the last 12 years have been like? Ethan's throat worked. No, but I'd like to, if you'll tell me. And that was when Lena realized she was crying. Not the pretty, delicate tears from movies, but the messy, angry kind that came from years of exhaustion and fear and trying to hold everything together with nothing but willpower and hope. I worked 3 jobs some years, she said, her voice breaking. I watched my mother get sicker and couldn't afford the treatments that might have helped. I gave up on dreams because dreams were a luxury I couldn't afford. I became small, Ethan. I made myself small enough to fit into a life where everything was about just getting through the day. He didn't say anything, just listened, his expression carved from stone, while she let 12 years of buried grief pour out. And you were out here building an empire, becoming a father, living a whole life. I know. His voice was rough. I know, and I'm sorry. If I could go back. But you can't. Lena wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. Neither of us can. They sat in silence. Outside the windows, the city continued on, indifferent to the small tragedy of 2 people trying to reconcile past and present. Finally, Ethan spoke. The trust is being transferred to your name. My lawyers are handling the paperwork. You should have access to the funds within a week. I don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's your inheritance. Your family's money that my father stole. His eyes met hers. Take it. Use it. Build the life you should have had. Lena looked down at the folder in her lap, at the evidence of a secret that had shaped both their lives in ways neither of them had understood. Part of her wanted to throw it back at him, to refuse everything on principle. But she thought about her mother's hospital bills, about the collection notices, about the way her back ached after every shift and the dreams she'd buried so deep she'd almost forgotten what they looked like. Okay, she whispered. Ethan nodded once, sharp and final. Okay. Lena stood, still holding the folder. Is there anything else? He hesitated, and she saw something flicker across his face. Hope, maybe, or longing, or some combination of emotions too complicated to name. Just one thing, he said. I never stopped thinking about you. All these years, every success, every failure, you were there. The memory of you. What we had, what I threw away. He swallowed hard. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking you to know that walking away from you was the biggest mistake of my life. Lena's chest felt tight. She wanted to say something cutting, something that would hurt him the way his leaving had hurt her. But she was too tired for cruelty, too worn down by years of survival to have energy left for revenge. I need to go, she said instead. My mother's nurse ends her shift at 4. Of course. Ethan walked her to the door, maintained a careful distance. If you need anything, questions about the trust, legal issues, anything at all, Patricia has my direct line. Thank you. She left before he could say anything else, before the tentative truce between them could crack into something messier. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up, the city rising to meet her as the glass box descended. On the street, Lena stood for a moment, letting the noise and movement of Philadelphia wash over her. She was holding a folder that represented a future she'd stopped believing in, carrying secrets about families and money and choices made decades before she was born. And somewhere above her, in an office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a child's drawing on the wall, Ethan Cole was probably standing exactly where she'd left him, caught in his own web of regrets and revelations. Lena tucked the folder into her bag and started walking. She had a bus to catch, a shift to work, a mother to take care of. The trust money might change her life, but it wouldn't change it today. Today, she still had to survive. But for the first time in 12 years, survival felt like it might not be the only option anymore. The paperwork came through faster than Lena expected. 6 days after her meeting with Ethan, she received a call from a law firm she'd never heard of, informing her that the trust had been transferred to her name and the funds were now accessible. The lawyer on the phone had a voice like expensive scotch, smooth, aged, completely unbothered by the fact that he was casually discussing an amount of money that made Lena's hands shake. You'll need to come in to sign some documents, he said. Standard verification procedures. How does tomorrow at 10 work for you? Lena looked at the shift schedule pinned to her refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a cupcake. A gift from her mother years ago, back when the bakery dream had still felt possible. She was supposed to work lunch service at Rosewoods. I'll make it work, she said. She called in sick for the first time in 3 years. James, her manager, sounded skeptical but didn't push it. Lena spent the evening trying on every piece of clothing she owned, searching for something that looked like the kind of outfit a person wore to sign papers that would change their life. Eventually, she settled on the same dress she'd worn to Ethan's office. It was the best she had, and pretending otherwise was pointless. Her mother was having a good day when Lena stopped by the hospital the next morning. The hospice nurse had gotten her into a chair by the window, and she was looking out at the parking lot with an expression that might have been peaceful or might have been the morphine doing its job. Hey, Mom. Lena pulled up a chair beside her. Her mother turned slowly, and for a moment her eyes were clear, focused, the woman she used to be visible beneath the layers of illness and medication. Lena, you look nice. Where are you going? Just some errands, legal stuff. Lena took her mother's hand, feeling the bones too close to the surface, the skin paper thin. How are you feeling today? Like I'm 90 instead of 56. Her mother's smile was tired. But I'm not complaining. Well, I am, but you know what I mean. Lena laughed despite herself. Even now, even like this, her mother could find moments of lightness. I need to tell you something, Lena said. Something happened, something big. She explained it all, or tried to. The trust, the hidden connection between their families, the money that had been sitting there for decades while they'd struggled to pay for generic medications and fought with insurance companies over every claim. Her mother listened without interrupting, her expression growing more complicated with each sentence. When Lena finished, her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, His father always was a bastard. You knew him? Ethan's father? Knew of him. Your grandfather mentioned him a few times before he died. Said they'd had a falling out over the business, that Cole Sr. had tried to freeze him out of deals that were rightfully half his. Her mother's grip on Lena's hand tightened slightly. I never knew there was money involved. If I had, it doesn't matter now. It matters, her mother said fiercely. It matters that we spent years drowning because some rich man decided he deserved what wasn't his. It matters that you gave up everything to take care of me when there was money sitting in some account that could have. Her voice cracked. Mom, don't. Lena leaned forward, resting her forehead against her mother's shoulder. Please don't. We survived. That's what matters. They sat like that for a while, the morning sun streaming through the window, the hospital sounds muted and distant. Finally, her mother pulled back, cupped Lena's face in her hands. What are you going to do with it? The money? I don't know yet. Get you into a better facility first, somewhere with actual windows and nurses who don't look dead on their feet. Lena swallowed hard. And then maybe I'll look at bakery spaces, if there's enough left over. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. You still want that? I never stopped wanting it. I just stopped believing I could have it. Then believe it now. Her mother's voice was stronger than it had been in months. Take that money and build something beautiful. Don't let what happened to us make you small, Lena. Don't let it steal what you were supposed to become. Lena promised she would, even though she wasn't sure she believed it yet. The dream felt so far away, buried under so many years of exhaustion and compromise, that she couldn't quite imagine digging it back up. The lawyer's office was in the same building as Ethan's, which felt like either cosmic irony or intentional design. Lena took the elevator to the 14th floor, trying not to think about the fact that Ethan was somewhere above her, probably in some meeting, probably not thinking about her at all. The signing took 45 minutes and required more initials than seemed reasonable. The lawyer, Mr. Harrison, silver-haired and professionally sympathetic, walked her through each document with the kind of patience that suggested he dealt with overwhelmed people regularly. And this one transfers the primary account access to you, he said, sliding another paper across the mahogany desk. Sign here and here. Lena signed, her signature looking shaky and uncertain next to the bold print of legal terminology she only half understood. One more question, Mr. Harrison said when they'd finished. Mr. Cole wanted me to ask if you'd considered which medical facility you'd prefer for your mother's transfer. He has contacts at several excellent hospice centers and wanted to offer assistance with— No. The word came out harder than Lena intended. Thank you, but no. I'll handle it myself. Mr. Harrison nodded, unbothered. Of course. The offer stands if you change your mind. He gathered the papers into a neat stack. Congratulations, Ms. Brooks. Not many people get a second chance like this. Lena left the office with a folder full of documents and a bank account that had more zeros than she'd ever imagined having access to. She stood in the building lobby for a moment, feeling untethered, like she might float away if she wasn't careful. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I hope the meeting went well. If you need recommendations for facilities or anything else, let me know. Ethan. Lena stared at the message. Part of her wanted to delete it, to maintain the distance she'd carefully constructed. But another part, the part that remembered who he'd been before he became this powerful stranger, wanted to respond, to maintain whatever fragile connection they'd started to rebuild. She typed out 3 different responses and deleted all of them. Finally, she settled on, Thank you. I'll figure it out. His reply came within seconds. I know you will. That was it. No pressure, no expectations, just an acknowledgement that felt strangely weighted. Lena shoved her phone in her pocket and headed for the exit. She was almost to the door when she heard someone call her name. Turning, she saw a woman approaching, late 30s, expensive suit, the kind of polished appearance that suggested personal trainers and regular salon appointments. The woman's smile was friendly, but there was something sharp in her eyes that made Lena's instincts prickle. Lena Brooks, right? I'm sorry to ambush you like this. The woman extended a hand. My name is Vanessa Chen. I'm a journalist. I write for the Philadelphia Business Review. Lena shook her hand warily. Okay. I saw you coming out of Harrison and Webb's office. They handle estate transfers, trust negotiations, that sort of thing. Vanessa's tone was casual, conversational, but Lena could feel the calculation behind it. I'm working on a piece about Cole architecture and some of their recent acquisitions. I was wondering if you'd be willing to answer a few questions. I don't know anything about Cole architecture. No? That's interesting, because you were seen at Ethan Cole's office last week, and now you're here meeting with the same law firm he uses. Vanessa tilted her head. That's quite a coincidence.
Lena's stomach dropped. I don't have anything to say to you. I understand.
It's a delicate situation. Vanessa pulled a business card from her purse. But if you change your mind, if you want to talk about your connection to the Cole family, or about Ethan specifically, I'd love to hear your perspective. Off the record, if you prefer. I said no. Lena turned and walked away, her heart pounding. Behind her, Vanessa Chen called out one more thing. Did he tell you about Marcus Reeves? About what really happened 3 years ago? Lena kept walking, but the name lodged itself in her brain like a splinter. Marcus Reeves. She'd never heard it before, but the way Vanessa had said it, like it was supposed to mean something, like it was supposed to make Lena stop and reconsider, made her skin crawl. She made it to the bus stop before she let herself pull out Vanessa's card. The journalist's email and phone number were printed in clean professional font. Lena almost threw it in the trash can beside the bench. Instead, she put it in her wallet. The next 2 weeks blurred together in a strange fugue state of old life and new possibilities. Lena continued working her shifts at Rosewood's and the diner, partly because she needed the routine and partly because she wasn't ready to explain to anyone why she was suddenly quitting. The trust money sat in her bank account like a sleeping giant she was afraid to wake. She did transfer her mother to a better facility, a hospice center on the outskirts of the city that had actual gardens and staff who seemed to remember that their patients were people, not just problems to be managed. The relief on her mother's face when she saw her new room, small but clean, with windows that looked out on trees instead of a parking lot, made Lena's throat tight. This must be costing a fortune, her mother said. Don't worry about it. Lena. Mom, please, just let me do this. Let me take care of you for once. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Okay, but you promised me something. What? Don't spend it all on me. Don't make me your whole reason for taking that money. Build something for yourself, too. Lena promised, even though she wasn't sure how to do both things at once. She started looking at bakery spaces on her phone during slow moments at work. Small storefronts in neighborhoods she could maybe afford, commercial kitchens that needed updating, lease agreements that made her head spin with their complexity. It felt surreal, like playing pretend, like she was a kid again, imagining what her life might look like someday. Ethan texted her occasionally. Never pushy, never demanding, just small check-ins that she could ignore if she wanted to. How's your mom doing? Did you find a facility you like? There's a commercial real estate agent I know, if you need help looking at spaces. Lena responded sometimes and didn't others. She couldn't figure out what she wanted from him, if anything. The anger she'd carried for 12 years hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted into something more complicated, harder to define. 3 weeks after signing the papers, she was working the dinner shift at Rosewood's when Rachel cornered her in the break room. Okay, what's going on with you? Lena looked up from her phone, where she'd been scrolling through listings for commercial ovens. What do you mean? You've been weird, distracted, and you called in sick, which you never do. Rachel crossed her arms. Are you dying? Are you in trouble? Did you finally snap and kill a customer? Despite everything, Lena laughed. No, none of that. Then what? For a moment, Lena considered lying. But Rachel had been covering her tables, swapping shifts with her, listening to her complain about rude customers for 3 years. She deserved something closer to the truth. I came into some money, family inheritance thing. I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. Rachel's eyes went wide. Holy shit! How much money? Enough to quit this job. Enough to... Lena hesitated. Enough to start over if I want to. Are you going to quit, I mean? I don't know, maybe, eventually. The words felt strange in her mouth, too big and unwieldy. It's complicated. Rachel studied her for a long moment. Does this have anything to do with that guy from table 19? The one who made you look like you'd seen a ghost? Lena should have known Rachel would remember that. She didn't miss much. Yeah, we used to know each other a long time ago. And now he's suddenly back in your life and you've got inheritance money. Rachel's expression turned shrewd. Lena, please tell me you're being careful. Please tell me this isn't some kind of situation where it's not like that. The money is real, legal. My family's, not his. Lena rubbed her eyes, suddenly exhausted. I know how it sounds, but I promise it's not some scam. Rachel didn't look entirely convinced, but she let it drop. Okay, but if you need anything, if this guy turns out to be trouble, You call me, all right? I will, thanks. That night, after her shift ended, Lena sat in her car in the restaurant parking lot and finally did what she'd been avoiding for weeks. She pulled up her laptop, opened a browser, and typed in Marcus Reeves Cole Architecture. The search results loaded and Lena's stomach sank.
Marcus Reeves had been an architect, 34 years old, with a small firm that specialized in sustainable housing. 3 years ago, he'd been in negotiations with Cole Architecture about a potential partnership. Then, abruptly, the deal had fallen apart. Reeves's firm had gone bankrupt within 6 months. The official story was poor financial management and over-leveraging, but there were forums and comment sections full of speculation about what had really happened. And then, 8 months after his company collapsed, Marcus Reeves had died. The obituary called it a tragic accident. He'd fallen from a construction site he'd been visiting, but the circumstances were murky, and several articles hinted at suicide without saying it outright. Lena found a photo of him, young, smiling, standing in front of a building he'd designed. He looked proud, hopeful. She scrolled deeper, finding blog posts from people who'd known him, industry gossip about the Cole Architecture deal. One post, from someone claiming to be Reeves's former business partner, alleged that Ethan had deliberately sabotaged the partnership after stealing Reeves's designs. That Cole Architecture had then used those designs in a major development project worth millions. Lena closed her laptop, her hand shaking. It might not be true. Internet rumors were just that, rumors. But Vanessa Chen had brought up Marcus Reeves like it was supposed to mean something, like it was a secret Ethan had kept from her. She thought about the man she'd met in that corner office, talking about his son and his dead wife and the trust he was transferring. He'd seemed sincere, regretful. But what did she really know about who he'd become in 12 years? Her phone rang, startling her. Ethan's name on the screen. Lena stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Hello? Hey, I hope I'm not calling too late. His voice sounded tired. I just wanted to check in, see how things are going with your mom's transfer. It's fine. She settled in. Good. That's good. A pause. Lena, is everything okay? You sound... Who was Marcus Reeves? The silence on the other end of the line stretched out long enough that Lena almost hung up. Finally, Ethan said, Where did you hear that name? Does it matter? Yes, it matters. His voice had gone flat, careful. Who talked to you? A journalist? Vanessa Chen. She approached me outside the lawyer's office. Lena's grip tightened on the phone. She asked if you'd told me about him, about what really happened. Ethan exhaled slowly. Can we meet? I'd rather have this conversation in person. I'm not sure I want to have this conversation at all. Lena, please. Whatever you read online, whatever this journalist told you, there's more to it than that. Let me explain. She should say no, should hang up, block his number, take the trust money, and disappear into the life she'd been planning to build. But the same part of her that had shown up at his office 3 weeks ago, the part that still needed answers, wouldn't let her walk away. When? Tomorrow. My office, or anywhere else you'd prefer. You choose. Lena thought about it. His office felt like his territory, his advantage. There's a coffee shop on Walnut Street, Brew and Crumb. Do you know it? I'll find it. What time? 10 in the morning. And Ethan, if you lie to me, if you try to spin this into something it's not, I'm done. Completely. Understood. He sounded like he was barely holding something back. I'll see you tomorrow. Lena ended the call and sat in her car, watching the last few employees trickle out of Rosewoods. James locked the front door, waved at her through the windshield, and headed to his own car. She should go home, get some sleep, but instead she pulled up the search results again, scrolling through articles about Marcus Reeves until her eyes burned and the parking lot was completely empty. Somewhere in the city, Ethan Cole was probably lying awake too, preparing whatever explanation he'd decided to give her. And somewhere else, Vanessa Chen was probably planning her next move, already writing the story in her head. Lena had wanted answers. Now she was drowning in questions instead, and the ground beneath her feet felt less solid with every revelation. She drove home through empty streets, past closed shops and dark windows, carrying the weight of a name she'd never heard before today, but couldn't seem to forget. Brew and Crumb was the kind of place Lena had always loved. Mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, the smell of fresh coffee and baked goods that made her chest ache with longing for the bakery she still hadn't quite let herself believe in. She arrived 15 minutes early and ordered a coffee she was too anxious to drink. Ethan showed up exactly at 10, looking like he hadn't slept. He'd dressed down, jeans and a sweater instead of his usual suit, but he still carried himself with that controlled stillness that made him seem apart from everyone around him. He got his own coffee and joined her at the corner table she'd chosen, far from other customers. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. Lena didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Tell me about Marcus Reeves." Ethan wrapped his hands around his coffee cup, staring down at it like it might contain answers. "Marcus and I met 6 years ago at an industry conference. He was brilliant, had this vision for sustainable architecture that was years ahead of what most people were doing. We talked about partnering on a project, combining his design philosophy with my firm's resources. And I was a different person then." Ethan's jaw tightened. "My wife had just been diagnosed. Noah was 3 years old. I was trying to hold everything together and failing at it, and I wasn't thinking clearly about a lot of things." "That's not an answer." "I know." He looked up at her finally. Marcus had designed this community housing concept, affordable, eco-friendly, scalable. It was exactly the kind of project that could have changed the industry. We started working together on it, drew up preliminary agreements, but then my father got involved. Lena's stomach nodded. "What did he do?" "He saw the designs and the market potential, and he decided Cole Architecture should develop it alone, without Marcus, without giving him credit or compensation." Ethan's voice was hollow. "I was so deep in grief and exhaustion that I didn't fight him hard enough. I told myself it was a business decision, that these things happened, that Marcus would land on his feet. But he didn't. No, my father made sure of it. He had connections everywhere. He blacklisted Marcus from partnerships, spread rumors about financial instability, made it impossible for him to get funding for other projects." Ethan set down his coffee cup, his hands unsteady. "Marcus's firm collapsed, and I let it happen because I was too broken to care about anything except keeping my own life from falling apart." Lena felt sick. "And then he died." "Yeah." Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "The official report said accidental fall, but I know better. I know what my father's interference cost him, what it cost his family. And I know I'm responsible, even if I didn't push him myself." "Did you try to help him, after?" "I tried to offer money to his widow. She threw it back in my face, told me that's all people like me knew how to do, throw money at problems instead of preventing them in the first place." Ethan met Lena's eyes. She was right. Lena sat back in her chair trying to process everything. "Why didn't you tell me this before, when you gave me the trust papers?" "Because I'm a coward." The admission seemed to cost him. "Because I wanted you to see me as someone who'd been forced into bad situations by my father, not someone who'd made their own terrible choices. I wanted to be the victim in my own story." "Are you using his designs? The ones your father stole?" "No. After he died, I shelved the entire project. Couldn't stomach the thought of profiting from it." Ethan hesitated. "But I recently started developing a version of it again, with full acknowledgement of Marcus's original work, with his widow's permission, with proceeds going to a foundation in his name." "Does she know about your father's role in what happened to Marcus?" "She knows everything now. I told her last year, after my father died, and I finally had the courage to face what we'd done." He looked exhausted. "She doesn't forgive me. I don't expect her to. But she agreed to let the project move forward because Marcus would have wanted his work to exist in the world, even if he couldn't be here to see it." Lena didn't know what to say. Every answer Ethan gave her seemed to open up new questions, new complications. The boy she'd known 12 years ago wouldn't have let something like this happen, but that boy was gone, replaced by this man who carried guilt like a second skin and seemed to be perpetually apologizing for crimes he couldn't undo. "Why are you telling me all this?" she asked finally. "Because you deserve to know who I am. Not who I was when we were kids, not who I want to be. Who I actually am right now." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "I spent years letting my father's cruelty dictate my choices. I told myself I was trapped, that I had no options. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared of losing my company, scared of fighting battles I might not win, scared of being the kind of man my father wanted me to be and finding out I already was. And now? Now I'm trying to be different, trying to fix what I can and accept what I can't. He paused. But I won't lie to you about the process. It's messy and incomplete, and I fail at it constantly. Lena studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance.
But all she saw was exhaustion and something that looked like genuine remorse. The journalist, Vanessa Chen, what does she want? A story. Probably one about corporate corruption and stolen designs and a tragic death that never got properly investigated. Ethan's expression darkened. She's been digging into my business for months. She thinks I'm hiding something bigger. Are you? No, but the truth is bad enough without embellishment. He met her eyes. If you talk to her, if you decide to share what you know, I won't stop you. You have every right. Lena shook her head slowly. I don't want to be part of whatever story she's writing. I don't want to be another chapter in the complicated legacy of Ethan Cole. Then what do you want? The question hung between them. Lena realized she didn't have a clear answer. She wanted her mother to be healthy. She wanted the bakery she'd been dreaming about since she was 16. She wanted to stop feeling like her life was something that happened to her instead of something she chose. And somewhere underneath all of that, buried beneath years of resentment and hurt, she wanted to understand if the connection she'd felt with Ethan 12 years ago had been real or just the invention of two lonely kids who'd mistaken intensity for love. I want you to stop trying to fix everything, she said finally. Stop trying to make up for your father's mistakes and your own past and whatever else you think you owe me. Just be honest, that's all. Ethan nodded slowly. I can do that. They sat in silence for a moment, the coffee shop noise filling the space between them. Finally, Lena stood. I need time to think about all this, to figure out what I'm doing with the trust money and my life and everything. Of course. Ethan stood too. Take whatever time you need. She started to leave, then stopped. Ethan? That project, the community housing with Marcus's designs, what's it called? Reeves Commons. It's breaking ground next month. Lena nodded and walked away, carrying the weight of another man's tragedy alongside her own unfinished story. Outside, the morning had turned gray and cold. Lena pulled her jacket tighter and started walking, no particular destination in mind. Her phone buzzed, a text from the hospice center. Her mother wanted to see her. She caught a bus heading toward the facility, watching Philadelphia slide past the windows. The city looked different now than it had a month ago. Or maybe she was the one who'd changed, who was seeing possibilities she'd trained herself not to notice. When she reached her mother's room, she found her sitting up in bed, looking more alert than she had in weeks. You look terrible, her mother said. Thanks, Mom. You're a real confidence booster. I'm serious. What happened? Lena sank into the chair beside the bed and told her everything. About Ethan's confession, about Marcus Reeves, about the choices that had shaped the last few years of Ethan's life and ended someone else's. Her mother listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled as the story unfolded. So what are you going to do? She asked when Lena finished. I don't know. Part of me thinks I should walk away, take the money and never talk to him again. But another part... Lena trailed off. Another part still cares about him. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if I'm caring about who he is or who he was, or some version of him that only exists in my head. Her mother reached out, took Lena's hand. Baby, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. People are complicated. They make terrible choices and good ones, sometimes in the same breath. Your father wasn't perfect. I'm not perfect. That boy you loved 12 years ago wasn't perfect either. I know that. Do you? Because it sounds like you're holding him to a standard nobody could meet. Her mother's grip tightened slightly. He made mistakes. He hurt people. He's trying to fix it now, even though he can't undo what's done. That's more than a lot of people do. You think I should forgive him? I think you should be honest with yourself about what you want. Not what you think you should want, not what's safe or smart, what you actually want. Her mother's eyes were clear, focused. And then, I think you should go get it, whatever it is. Lena stayed with her mother for another hour, then headed home as the afternoon slipped into evening. She had a night shift at the diner, but for once, she didn't care about being early. At home, she pulled out her laptop and started searching for bakery spaces again. Not just browsing this time, but seriously looking. Comparing prices, locations, lease terms. She found 3 possibilities, 2 that might work, and 1 that made her heart skip when she saw the photos. It was small, just a corner storefront in a neighborhood that was still rough around the edges but slowly gentrifying. The space needed work, new floors, updated electrical, a complete kitchen renovation. But it had good bones and high ceilings and windows that would flood the place with morning light. Lena saved the listing, then pulled out Vanessa Chen's business card. She stared at it for a long moment before tearing it in half and throwing it in the trash. Whatever story Vanessa wanted to write, Lena wasn't going to be part of it. She had her own story to figure out first. The bakery space became Lena's obsession over the next 3 weeks. She visited it 4 times, each trip revealing new problems she'd have to solve. The plumbing was a disaster, the electrical panel looked like a fire hazard waiting to happen, and the previous tenant had left behind equipment so old it belonged in a museum. But every time she stood in that empty room with sunlight streaming through the windows, she could see it. The display cases along the front wall, the smell of bread baking in the early morning, customers sitting at small tables with coffee and croissants. She could see the life she was supposed to have. "You're actually doing this," Rachel said when Lena finally told her she was putting in an offer on the space. They were folding napkins during a slow Tuesday lunch shift at Rosewoods, the kind of mindless task that made conversations easier. "I think so. Maybe. I don't know." Lena smoothed out a napkin with more force than necessary. "It's terrifying." "Good terrifying or bad terrifying?" "Both." Lena paused. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I sink all this money into it and nobody comes? What if it works?" Rachel interrupted. "What if you're actually amazing at it and you build something that makes you happy for the first time in forever?" Lena didn't have an answer for that. Hope felt dangerous, like something that could shatter if she held it too tightly. She'd been avoiding Ethan since their meeting at the coffee shop, responding to his occasional texts with brief, non-committal answers. She needed space to think, to figure out what she wanted without his presence complicating everything. But the more time passed, the more she found herself remembering small details from their conversation. The exhaustion in his eyes, the way his voice had cracked when he talked about Marcus Reeves, the complete absence of excuses or justifications. He'd been honest with her, even when the truth made him look terrible. That had to count for something. The call came on a Thursday afternoon while Lena was meeting with a contractor about the bakery renovations. She almost didn't answer, but the number was from the hospice center. "Ms. Brooks, this is Dr. Okonkwo. Your mother asked me to call you." Lena's heart stopped. "Is she—" "She's stable, but she's had a difficult morning. She's asking to see you when you have time." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. She made it in 15, her hands shaking on the steering wheel the entire drive. The hospice nurse met her at the door to her mother's room, expression kind but serious. "She's been in a lot of pain today. We've adjusted her medication, but she's still lucid. She wanted to wait for you before taking anything stronger." Lena pushed open the door. Her mother was in bed, propped up on pillows, looking smaller and frailer than she had just days ago, but her eyes were clear when she saw Lena. "Hey, baby." "Mom?" Lena crossed to the bed, took her mother's hand carefully. "What happened?" "Just a bad day. They happen." Her mother's smile was weak but real. "I wanted to see you before I got too foggy from the drugs." "I'm here. I'm right here." They sat in silence for a moment, Lena holding her mother's hand and trying not to think about how light it felt, how the bones seemed to press through skin that had become translucent. "I've been thinking about your bakery," her mother said finally. "About what you're building. You should be resting, not worrying about—" "Lena." Her mother's grip tightened slightly. "Let me say this. I need to say this." Lena nodded, her throat tight. "I'm proud of you. For taking the money, for not letting pride or fear stop you from accepting something you deserved, for deciding to build something instead of just surviving." Her mother's voice was getting weaker, but the words were clear. "But I'm also worried." "About what?" "About you doing all this alone. About you thinking you have to be strong and independent and never need anyone." Her mother shifted slightly, wincing.
That boy, Ethan, he hurt you, I know that. But he's also trying to make things right, and you're so scared of getting hurt again that you won't even let him try. Mom, it's complicated. Everything worth having is complicated. Her mother coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made Lena reach for the water cup on the bedside table. After a sip, her mother continued. I spent 10 years after your father died telling myself I didn't need anyone, that needing people made you weak. And you know what I learned? What? That I was full of shit. That being alone isn't strength, it's just lonely. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. Don't make my mistakes, baby. Don't close yourself off because the world hurt you. Don't let what happened turn you into someone who only knows how to protect herself. Lena felt something crack open in her chest. I don't know how to trust him. I don't know if I can. Then don't trust him yet. But don't walk away either. Give yourself permission to figure it out, instead of deciding it's already broken. The nurse knocked softly and entered. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we really should adjust her medication now. Lena nodded, blinking back tears. She leaned down and kissed her mother's forehead. I love you. Love you too. Now go build something beautiful, and maybe let someone help you do it. Lena stayed until her mother drifted into medicated sleep, then drove home through rush hour traffic in a daze. When she got to her apartment, she sat in her car for 10 minutes before finally pulling out her phone. She typed and deleted 3 messages to Ethan before settling on something simple. Can we talk? His response came almost immediately. When? Tonight? I could come to your office after you're done with work. Or I could come to you, if you'd prefer. Lena gave him her address, then spent the next 2 hours cleaning her apartment like her life depended on it. She scrubbed the bathroom, organized the kitchen, tried to make the space look less like the home of someone who was barely holding their life together. By the time Ethan knocked on her door at 7:30, she'd worked herself into a state of anxiety that made her hands shake. He looked different than he had at the coffee shop, more casual, wearing jeans and a plain black sweater, holding a paper bag that smelled like Thai food. I wasn't sure if you'd eaten, he said. I hope Thai is okay. I remember you used to like that place on... He stopped. Sorry. I shouldn't assume you still like the same things. Lena stepped back, letting him in. I still like Thai food. Thank you. The apartment felt impossibly small with Ethan standing in it. He looked around, taking in the worn furniture and the water-stained ceiling and the refrigerator held together with duct tape. And Lena felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the kiss they'd shared 12 years ago and everything to do with the life she'd built since. Your place is nice, Ethan said, and she could tell he was trying to mean it. It's a dump. You don't have to pretend. It's yours. That makes it something. He set the food on her small kitchen table. Should we eat first or... Let's talk. Lena sat down on the couch, which sagged under her weight in a way she'd stopped noticing years ago. I've been thinking about what you told me, about Marcus Reeves and your father and all of it. Ethan sat in the chair across from her, his posture careful. Okay? I need to know something, and I need you to be completely honest, even if the answer makes you look bad. All right. Well, if your father were still alive, if he still had control over your company and your life, would you have told me any of this? Would you have given me the trust money, or would you have just kept pretending I didn't exist? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. I'd like to say yes. I'd like to believe I would have found the courage to stand up to him eventually. But honestly, I don't know. He had a way of making you believe that resistance was futile, that the only way to survive was to become what he wanted you to be. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I spent most of my 20s being exactly what he demanded. I married someone he approved of, built the company the way he wanted it built, made compromises I'm still ashamed of. It wasn't until after he died that I started to understand how much of myself I'd given up just to exist in his world. Lena studied his face. Do you think you would have come back to me eventually, if he'd lived? I used to tell myself I would, that someday I'd be strong enough or successful enough to break free and find you and explain everything. He shook his head. But that was a fantasy. The truth is, I probably would have stayed trapped in that life forever, telling myself I was protecting you by staying away.
The honesty of it hurt more than a lie would have. So what changed besides him dying? Noah. Ethan's expression softened. Being his father made me realize what I'd become. I didn't want him to grow up thinking that power and control were the same as strength. I didn't want him to learn how to bury the parts of himself that didn't fit someone else's expectations. So I started trying to be different. For him, and eventually for myself. And for me? Ethan met her eyes. You were always there, in the back of my mind, in every choice I made after I left. I kept telling myself that someday I'd find a way back to you, even when I knew it was probably too late. Even when I knew you'd moved on and built a life that didn't include me. I didn't move on, Lena said quietly. I just survived. There's a difference. They sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Lena stood up and went to the window, looking out at the street below. A couple was walking past, holding hands, laughing about something. She watched them disappear around the corner. I'm buying a bakery space, she said without turning around. Or I'm trying to. The offer's been submitted. I should know in a few days if it's accepted. Lena, that's incredible. It's terrifying. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've been watching YouTube videos about commercial ovens and business licenses and health inspections. She turned to face him. But I'm doing it anyway. Because my mom is dying and she wants me to build something that matters, and I can't keep living like I'm just waiting for my real life to start. Ethan stood up slowly. Is there anything I can do to help? That's the thing. I don't know if I want your help. Lena crossed her arms. I don't know if letting you be part of this would be taking advantage of your guilt or accepting support from someone who cares or setting myself up to get hurt again when you decide this whole redemption project is too complicated. I'm not going anywhere. You said that before. 12 years ago, you promised me forever and then you disappeared. I know. Ethan's voice was rough. And I can't undo that, but I can promise you something different now. I can promise I'll be honest, even when it's hard. I can promise I won't make decisions for you to protect you from things I think you can't handle. I can promise that if I need to walk away, I'll tell you why, instead of just vanishing. Those are smaller promises than forever. Yeah, but they're ones I can actually keep. Lena felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She was so tired of being strong, so tired of holding everything together alone. Part of her wanted to step forward and let Ethan hold her, let herself be weak for just a moment. But another part, the part that had learned to survive by trusting no one, kept her frozen in place. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Do what? Let you back in. Trust you again. Risk getting hurt the way I was hurt before. Ethan crossed the small space between them, stopping a few feet away, close enough that she could see the silver threading through his hair at his temples, the fine lines around his eyes, all the ways time had changed both of them. Then don't, he said. Don't trust me yet. Don't let me all the way in. Just let me be around. Let me help with the bakery if you need it. Or don't if you'd rather do it alone. Let me check in on you without it having to mean something bigger than it is. And if I decide I can't ever trust you again, if I decide the past is too damaged to build anything on, then I'll accept that. And I'll still make sure the trust money stays yours. And I'll still finish Reeves Commons, and I'll still try to be a better person than I was. He paused. But I'm hoping you won't. Decide that, I mean. I'm hoping you'll give us a chance to figure out what we could be now, instead of mourning what we were. Lena wanted to say yes. She wanted to close the distance between them and let herself believe that people could change, that broken things could be repaired, that love could survive 12 years of absence and still mean something. But before she could respond, her phone rang. The hospice center again. She grabbed it, her heart racing. Hello? Ms. Brooks, I'm sorry to call again. Your mother is asking for you. She's struggling a bit. I'll be right there. She ended the call and looked at Ethan. I have to go. I'll drive you. You don't have to... Lena. His voice was gentle. Let me do this, please. She nodded, too worried to argue. They left the Thai food on the table and headed down to where Ethan's car was parked, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than she'd make in 5 years of waiting tables. The drive to the hospice center took 20 minutes, and neither of them spoke. Ethan just drove while Lena stared out the window and tried to prepare herself for whatever she was about to walk into. When they arrived,
Ethan parked and started to get out. "You should wait here," Lena said. "Are you sure?" She wasn't sure of anything anymore. But her mother was dying, and this moment felt too private, too raw to share with someone who was still figuring out how to be part of her life again. "Yeah, I'm sure." She found her mother awake but clearly in pain. Her breathing labored despite the oxygen. The nurse was adjusting something on the IV when Lena walked in. "Hey, Mom!" Her mother turned her head slowly. "You came." "Of course I came." Lena pulled the chair close to the bed and took her mother's hand. "I had a dream," her mother said, her voice barely above a whisper, "about your bakery. It was beautiful, baby, full of people and light and the smell of bread. It will be, I promise. And you weren't alone. There was someone with you, helping." Lena's throat tightened. "Mom, I know you're scared, but sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself need someone." Her mother's grip on Lena's hand was weak but deliberate. "Don't do what I did. Don't make yourself so strong that you forget how to be soft." They sat together for an hour, Lena holding her mother's hand while the medication gradually pulled her under. The nurse checked in periodically, her expression growing more somber each time. Finally, she took Lena aside in the hallway. "Her organs are starting to fail. It could be days or it could be weeks, but—" The nurse paused. "You should prepare yourself. And if there's anyone she'd want to see, anyone you'd want here, now would be the time." Lena nodded numbly. She'd known this was coming, had been bracing for it for months. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it crash into you were different things entirely. When she made it back to the parking lot, Ethan was still there, leaning against his car. He straightened when he saw her. "How is she?" "Dying." The word came out flat. "The nurse says it could be soon." Ethan didn't try to offer platitudes or false hope. He just opened the passenger door. "Where do you need to go?" "Home. I need to figure out what to do." The drive back was as silent as the drive there had been. When they reached her apartment, Lena couldn't make herself get out of the car. She just sat there, staring at the building where she'd lived for 3 years, where she'd survived but never quite thrived. "She wants me to let you help," Lena said finally. "With the bakery. With everything." "What do you want?" "I want to not be alone anymore. I want to stop pretending I can do everything by myself. I want—" Her voice broke. "I want to believe that you won't leave again." Ethan reached over and took her hand. His palm was warm, solid, real. "I won't leave. Not unless you tell me to go." Lena looked down at their joined hands, at the way his fingers laced through hers like they'd done it 1,000 times before. "Okay. Okay. Help me with the bakery. Be around. Let's figure out what this is, one day at a time." She met his eyes. "But if you hurt me again, if you disappear or lie, or make me feel the way I felt 12 years ago, I'm done. No second chances after this." "Understood." They sat in the car for a few more minutes, hands still clasped, before Lena finally pulled away and got out. Ethan rolled down the window. "Call me if you need anything, anytime." "I will." She watched him drive away, then climbed the stairs to her apartment. The Thai food was still on the table, probably cold now. Lena put it in the refrigerator and then just stood in her kitchen, feeling the weight of everything that had happened in the last few hours. Her mother was dying. She was buying a bakery. And Ethan Cole was back in her life, offering help and promises and a second chance she wasn't sure she deserved or could trust. The next morning, Lena's real estate agent called to tell her the offer had been accepted. The bakery space was hers, pending inspection and final paperwork. She should have been excited. Instead, she felt numb. She called Ethan. "The bakery. They accepted my offer." "Lena, that's amazing. Congratulations. Can you meet me there? I need to start figuring out renovations, and I don't want to do it alone." "I'll be there in 30 minutes. He arrived in 25, carrying coffee and a notebook. They walked through the space together, Ethan taking measurements and making notes while Lena described what she wanted. Display cases here, ovens against that wall, a small seating area by the windows. "The electrical will need to be completely redone," Ethan said, examining the panel. "And the plumbing is a mess, but the bones are good, really good." "How much is this going to cost?" He showed her his rough estimate. The number made her stomach drop. "That's more than half the trust money. It's an investment in your future, in something that's yours. Ethan set down his notebook. But if you'd rather start smaller, we can work with what's here and upgrade gradually. Lena looked around the empty space, trying to see past the water damage and broken fixtures to the dream underneath. No, let's do it right. Let's build something that lasts. They spent the next 3 hours going over plans, Ethan sketching out rough layouts while Lena described her vision. It felt easy in a way she hadn't expected, their ideas building on each other, his architectural knowledge filling in the gaps where her imagination ran out of practical details. "You're good at this," she said at one point. "At what?" "Listening, helping without taking over. Your father never taught you that, did he?" "No, I had to learn it the hard way." Ethan put down his pencil. "Lena, can I ask you something?" "Sure."
Well, why a bakery? I know you've always wanted one, but why this specifically? Why bread and pastries instead of something else?
Lena was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain it. Because baking is about transformation. You take these basic ingredients, flour, water, yeast, salt, and you turn them into something that sustains people, something that makes them happy. There's this moment when you pull bread out of the oven and it's perfect, all golden and crackling, and you know you made something good, something real. And that matters to you. Yeah, it matters. She met his eyes. I've spent so many years just surviving, just getting through each day. I want to make something that's about more than survival, something that feeds people in a way that matters. Ethan was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're going to be amazing at this." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Because you care about it. Because you're willing to risk everything to build something meaningful." He paused. "That's more than most people ever do." They were standing close now, close enough that Lena could see the green flecks in his eyes, close enough to remember what it had felt like to kiss him when they were young and believed in forever. The air between them felt charged, heavy with possibility and fear in equal measure. Lena stepped back. "We should keep working. There's still a lot to figure out." If Ethan was disappointed, he didn't show it. He just picked up his notebook and moved on to discussing contractor bids and construction timelines. They worked until early afternoon when Lena's phone rang. The hospice center. Her mother had taken a turn. She needed to come now. Ethan drove her there again, staying in the waiting room while Lena sat with her mother through the worst of it. The doctor explained that they were entering the final stages, that it was time to start thinking about end-of-life decisions and whether her mother wanted to continue certain treatments. Lena held her mother's hand and tried to be strong enough for both of them, but inside she was falling apart. When she finally emerged from the room hours later, exhausted and hollow, Ethan was still there. He'd gotten coffee and sandwiches from somewhere, and he pressed a cup into her hands without asking if she wanted it. "Drink. You need something." Lena drank because arguing felt like too much work. The coffee was sweet, the way she liked it. She wondered if he remembered that, or if it was just a lucky guess. "Thank you for staying," she said. "Where else would I be?" It was the kind of thing someone said automatically, a throwaway phrase. But the way Ethan said it made it sound like a promise. They sat in the waiting room together while the afternoon faded into evening, and Lena let herself lean against his shoulder because she was too tired to hold herself upright anymore. It didn't have to mean anything. It was just two people sitting together while the world kept turning and everything familiar slowly slipped away. "Tell me about Noah," Lena said after a while. "Your son." Ethan shifted slightly, but didn't pull away. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. What's he like?" "He's 6, like I said, obsessed with dinosaurs and buildings and this one specific brand of chicken nuggets. He's smart, sometimes too smart for his own good. Asks questions I don't know how to answer." Ethan's voice softened. "He looks like his mother. Same eyes, same smile. I'm grateful for that."
Do you miss her? Your wife?
"Not in the way you probably think. We cared about each other, but we weren't in love. We both knew that. It was more like a partnership. Two people trying to do their best for their kid." He paused. "But I miss having someone to share the parenting with. Someone who knew Noah as well as I did." "That must be lonely." "Yeah, it is." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "He asks about you sometimes." Lena sat up slightly, surprised. "What? How would he even know about me?" "I told him. After I saw you at the restaurant. I told him I'd run into an old friend, someone I used to know a long time ago. Ethan met her eyes. He wanted to know why I looked sad when I talked about you. What did you tell him? That sometimes people care about each other, but life takes them in different directions, and that it's okay to be sad about that. Lena didn't know what to say. The image of Ethan explaining her existence to his 6-year-old son felt impossibly intimate, like she'd been woven into a part of his life she had no right to occupy. I'd like to meet him someday, she said. If that's okay? Yeah, I'd like that too. A nurse appeared in the doorway looking for Lena. Her mother was asking for her again. Lena stood, and Ethan stood with her. Go, he said. I'll be here. She went back to her mother's room, back to the vigil that had become her life, carrying with her the warmth of Ethan's presence like a small light in the gathering dark. Her mother died 3 days later on a Tuesday morning while Lena was stuck in traffic trying to get to the hospice center. By the time she arrived, it was over. The nurse met her in the hallway with that particular expression of professional sympathy that Lena had come to recognize, and she knew before anyone said a word. She went peacefully, the nurse told her. She wasn't in pain, she just slipped away. Lena nodded, because that's what you did in these moments, even though nothing about it felt peaceful. She sat with her mother's body for an hour, holding a hand that was already growing cold, and tried to reconcile the stillness in front of her with the woman who'd raised her alone, who'd worked 2 jobs to keep them fed, who'd never once complained about the hand life had dealt her. I'm going to build it, Mom, Lena whispered. The bakery. Everything you wanted for me. I promise. The body didn't answer. Bodies never did. Ethan arrived while she was signing paperwork in the administrative office, navigating the bureaucracy of death with shaking hands. He must have called the hospice center to check in, must have dropped everything when they told him. He stood in the doorway until she looked up, and then he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. Lena broke. She'd been holding it together for months, years really, and suddenly she couldn't anymore. She sobbed into Ethan's chest while he held her, one hand cradling the back of her head, not saying anything because there was nothing to say. Around them, the administrative staff pretended not to notice, shuffling papers and typing quietly while Lena fell apart. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her eyes were swollen, and she probably looked like a disaster. Ethan handed her a tissue without comment. There's a funeral home. They need me to make decisions about... Lena couldn't finish the sentence. Let me handle it. Tell me what she would have wanted and I'll make the arrangements. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Please, Lena. Let me do this. She was too exhausted to argue. She gave him the name of the funeral home her mother had picked out years ago, back when they'd still had time to plan for things like this, and then she let him guide her out to his car. Where do you want to go? He asked once they were on the road. I don't know. Not home. I can't go back to that apartment right now. Okay. Ethan drove without asking more questions, and Lena closed her eyes and tried to breathe through the grief that felt like it was crushing her chest. She must have dozed off, because when she opened her eyes again, they were pulling into a driveway in front of a house she didn't recognize. It was nice. Not ostentatious, but clearly expensive, with a manicured lawn and tall windows that probably let in beautiful light. Where are we? My place. I thought you said you didn't want to go home, and I figured a hotel would feel worse. But if you'd rather... No, this is fine. Thank you. Inside, the house was exactly what she'd expected from someone like Ethan. Tastefully furnished, clean lines, the kind of understated wealth that didn't need to announce itself. But there were also signs of a child everywhere. Toys in a basket by the stairs, crayon drawings on the refrigerator, small sneakers kicked off by the door. Noah's at school, Ethan said, following her gaze. He won't be home until 3. You can rest in the guest room, or we can sit in the living room, or whatever you need. What Lena needed was to not be alone with her thoughts, but she didn't know how to say that. She ended up on the couch in the living room while Ethan disappeared into the kitchen. He returned with tea she didn't remember asking for and sat in the chair across from her, close enough to be present, but far enough to give her space. Tell me what you need, he said. I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. There's no supposed to. You just do whatever you can manage, one thing at a time. Lena wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat ground her.
The funeral home is going to call, aren't they? They're going to need decisions about caskets and flowers and all these things that don't matter because she's gone and none of it is going to bring her back. It matters because it's how we say goodbye. It matters because it's the last thing you can do for her. I hate that this is the last thing. I hate that I don't get more time. I know. Ethan's voice was soft. I'm sorry. They sat in silence for a while. Eventually, Lena's phone started ringing. People from the hospice center, the funeral home, her mother's friends who'd somehow already heard the news. She couldn't make herself answer, so Ethan took the phone and handled it, his voice calm and professional as he fielded condolences and made arrangements. Lena watched him and thought about how strange it was to have someone take care of her after years of being the one who did the caretaking. Strange, and a little frightening, and something else she couldn't quite name. Around 2 o'clock, Ethan convinced her to eat something. She picked at a sandwich while he talked to the funeral director on the phone, approving choices she'd been too overwhelmed to make. When he hung up, he looked at her carefully. I told them we'd come in tomorrow to finalize everything. Is that okay? We? If you want me there. If not, I can just... No, please come. Lena set down the sandwich. I don't want to do this alone. Then you won't have to. At 3:15, the front door burst open and a small tornado of energy exploded into the house. Noah was 6 years old with dark hair and his mother's eyes, exactly like Ethan had described. He was talking before he even saw Lena, something about dinosaurs and his friend Jacob, and whether they could have pizza for dinner. Noah, Ethan said, standing up. We have a guest. This is my friend Lena. Noah stopped mid-sentence and looked at her with the frank curiosity of children who hadn't learned to pretend yet. Are you the sad friend Dad told me about? Lena couldn't help it. She laughed, even though her eyes were still red from crying. Yeah, I guess I am. Why are you sad? Noah, Ethan started, but Lena shook her head. It's okay. She looked at Noah. My mom died today, so I'm sad about that. Noah considered this seriously. My mom died too, when I was 3. I don't remember her much, but Dad says she was nice. I bet she was. Do you want to see my dinosaur collection? Dad says showing people things you like can make them feel better. Lena glanced at Ethan, who looked like he was trying to decide whether to intervene. Sure, I'd like that. Noah grabbed her hand and pulled her upstairs to his room, which was exactly what a 6-year-old boy's room should be. Organized chaos with toys everywhere and posters of dinosaurs covering the walls. He showed her each one, explaining their names and which ones were herbivores and which ones could kill you fastest. This one's my favorite, he said, holding up a plastic T-Rex. Because it's scary but also kind of cool, like how some things can be both. That's very wise, Lena said, and meant it. They spent 20 minutes talking about dinosaurs and buildings, and why chicken nuggets were the best food ever invented. When they finally came back downstairs, Ethan was in the kitchen starting dinner. He looked relieved to see Lena smiling, even if the smile was small and fragile. Noah, go wash your hands. Lena, are you okay with pasta? It's basically all I know how to make that doesn't come from a restaurant. Pasta's perfect. Dinner was chaotic and comfortable in a way Lena hadn't expected. Noah talked nonstop, asking questions about everything from her favorite color to whether she'd ever seen a real dinosaur skeleton. Ethan tried to rein him in occasionally, but mostly he just let his son be himself, energetic and curious and completely unfiltered. Do you have kids? Noah asked at one point. No, it's just me now. You could have a dog. Dogs are almost as good as kids. Better maybe, because they don't make you eat vegetables. I'll keep that in mind. After dinner, Ethan put Noah to bed while Lena helped clean up the kitchen. She was loading the dishwasher when he came back downstairs. He likes you, Ethan said. He doesn't usually warm up to people that fast. He's a good kid. You're doing something right. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together, but thank you. Ethan leaned against the counter. How are you doing? Really? Lena closed the dishwasher and turned to face him. I don't know. It doesn't feel real yet. Like any minute she's going to call and ask me to pick up her prescriptions or tell me about something the nurse said. It'll hit you in waves. The grief. Sometimes when you least expect it. You sound like you know from experience. My wife, it took months before I stopped turning to tell her something about Noah, before I stopped expecting her to walk through the door. Ethan's expression was distant. There's no timeline for it. You just survive it however you can. Lena nodded, feeling the weight of the day settling into her bones. I should probably go home. I have work tomorrow, and I need to take time off, however much you need. I can't afford to. She stopped. That wasn't true anymore, was it? She had the trust money. She didn't have to work herself into exhaustion just to survive. I keep forgetting that things are different now. They are different. You get to choose what comes next, instead of just reacting to whatever happens. Ethan moved closer. Stay here tonight. The guest room is made up, and you shouldn't be alone. Ethan, please, this isn't me trying to push anything. I just don't want you going back to an empty apartment when you're grieving. Lena was too tired to argue, and truthfully, she didn't want to be alone either. Okay. Thank you. The guest room was at the end of the hall, decorated in neutral tones with a bed that looked impossibly comfortable. Ethan lent her a t-shirt and sweatpants to sleep in, and then left her alone with a quiet goodnight. Lena lay in the unfamiliar bed and stared at the ceiling, waiting for the tears to come again. But she was all cried out, at least for now. Instead, she felt hollow, like someone had scooped out her insides and left only the shell behind. She must have slept eventually because she woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. When she made her way to the kitchen, Ethan was making breakfast while Noah ate cereal at the counter. Morning, Ethan said. Coffee's fresh. How did you sleep? Better than I expected. Lena poured herself a cup. Thank you for letting me stay. You can stay as long as you want. I mean that. Noah looked up from his cereal. Are you going to live with us now? Noah, Ethan said quickly, that's not... Lena has her own place, but she could stay if she wanted to, right? We have the extra room. Lena caught Ethan's eye and saw the embarrassment there, the apology he was trying to communicate without words. But she also saw something else. Hope, maybe, or longing. The possibility that he wanted exactly what his son was suggesting, even if he'd never asked for it. I have to go take care of some things, Lena said gently. But maybe I can come visit again sometime? Noah brightened. Can we show her the building site, Dad? The one with the park? If Lena wants to see it, sure. What building site? Lena asked. Ethan hesitated. Reeves Commons, the community housing project I told you about. We broke ground 2 weeks ago. It's going to be what Marcus designed, what he should have seen built. I'd like to see it, Lena said. Not today, but soon. They had breakfast together, and then Ethan drove her home so she could shower and change before the funeral home appointment. He offered to come back and pick her up, but Lena told him she'd meet him there. She needed a little time alone, needed to remember how to exist in her own space without her mother being just a phone call away. Her apartment felt different when she walked in. Emptier somehow, even though nothing had changed. All her mother's things were still at the hospice center, waiting to be collected. All the medical equipment and pill bottles and reminders of illness were gone, leaving behind only the echoes of the life they'd built together. Lena stood in the middle of her living room and let herself feel it. The loss, the loneliness, the terrifying freedom of being completely untethered. She had no one depending on her anymore, no one to take care of, no reason to keep going except that she'd promised she would. The funeral arrangements took 2 hours. Lena chose the simplest casket, the most basic service, because her mother would have hated the idea of money being wasted on a fancy funeral when it could go towards something living instead. Ethan sat beside her through all of it, offering opinions when she asked, and staying quiet when she didn't. Afterward, they sat in his car in the parking lot. What happens now? Lena asked. The service is in 3 days. You have time to notify people, to write an obituary if you want one, to... Ethan stopped. Sorry, you probably know all this. No, keep going. I need someone to tell me what to do because I have no idea. So he did. He walked her through the next steps, the things she'd need to handle, the people she'd need to contact. And then he said something that surprised her. After the funeral, take a week. Don't make any big decisions. Don't push yourself to be okay. Just exist for a while. The bakery can wait. Everything can wait. I don't know if I can do that. If I stop moving, If I let myself just sit with this, you'll survive it. I promise. It'll hurt like hell, but you'll survive. Lena looked at him, at this man who'd known grief intimately, who'd buried a wife and kept going for his son. How do you do it? How do you keep showing up when everything feels impossible? Because Noah needs me to. Because giving up isn't an option when there's someone depending on you. Ethan reached over and took her hand. And now you have people depending on you, too. Your bakery, your dreams, your future customers who don't know it yet. You keep going for them. That's a lot of pressure. Yeah, but you're strong enough to carry it. The funeral was small. Her mother hadn't had many friends left. Years of illness had whittled down her social circle to a handful of loyal souls who showed up despite the rain. Lena stood by the casket and accepted condolences from people she barely remembered, their faces blurring together into a procession of sympathy. Ethan stood in the back with Noah, giving her space but making his presence known. She was grateful for that, for someone who understood when to step forward and when to stay back. Rachel came, which surprised Lena. They'd only been work friends, not real friends, but there she was in a black dress that didn't quite fit, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I'm so sorry," Rachel said, hugging her. "Your mom was... I never met her, but she raised you, so she must have been pretty incredible." "She was. Thank you for coming." "Of course. And listen, take whatever time you need. James said to tell you your job will be there when you're ready, or it won't if you decide to do something else. No pressure either way." After the service, there was a small reception at a community center her mother's church had helped arrange. Lena moved through it mechanically, eating food she couldn't taste, thanking people for coming, accepting casseroles and sympathy cards she'd probably never open. She was standing by the window looking out at the rain when someone approached, a woman, probably in her early 40s, with tired eyes and a hesitant smile. "Lena Brooks?" the woman asked. "Yes?" "I'm Sarah Reeves, Marcus's widow." Lena's stomach dropped. She glanced around, but Ethan was across the room talking to Noah. Hello, I'm sorry, I didn't expect... I know. I probably shouldn't have come." Sarah looked uncomfortable. "I saw the obituary in the paper. Your mother's name, Brooks. I remembered Ethan mentioning you. I don't know what I thought, that I should pay my respects, maybe." "Did Ethan know you were coming?" "No, I haven't spoken to him in a few months. We've kept things professional since we agreed on the Reeves Commons project." Sarah paused. "He told you about Marcus, didn't he? About what happened?" "Yes, he told me everything." "Good. That's good." Sarah looked relieved. "I wanted to hate him for so long, for what his father did, for not fighting harder to stop it. But then he came to me last year and told me the truth about everything, and he offered to make it right however he could. And I realized..." She stopped, swallowing hard. "I realized that hating him wasn't bringing Marcus back. It was just making me bitter. I'm sorry for what happened to your husband." "Me too, every day." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "But I'm trying to let it be a tragedy instead of a grudge. Trying to let Marcus's work live on instead of being buried with him. Ethan's helping with that, even though he doesn't have to." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Sarah reached out and squeezed Lena's hand. "He cares about you. A lot. I can see it in the way he talks about you, the way he changes when your name comes up." Sarah's smile was sad. "Don't let the past poison what you could have now. Marcus would tell you the same thing if he were here. Life's too short to hold on to anger when you could be holding on to something else instead." She left before Lena could respond, disappearing into the crowd of mourners. Lena stood there, processing the unexpected encounter until Ethan appeared at her elbow. "Was that Sarah Reeves?" "Yeah." Lena turned to face him. "She came to pay her respects." "She didn't have to do that." "I think she wanted to. She said..." Lena hesitated. "She said you're a good person in your way, that you're trying to make things right." Ethan looked uncomfortable. "I'm trying. I don't know if that's the same as being good." "Maybe it is. Maybe trying is all any of us can do." The reception wound down slowly, people trickling out until it was just Lena and Ethan and Noah, who'd fallen asleep on one of the chairs. Ethan picked up his son carefully, and Lena gathered the sympathy cards and leftover food that well-meaning people had insisted she take home. "Come back to the house," Ethan said. "You shouldn't be alone tonight." Lena wanted to argue, wanted to prove she could handle this by herself, but the thought of going back to her empty apartment, of sitting alone with her grief, was too much. "Okay, just for tonight." Except one night turned into 2, and then 3. Lena found herself settling into the guest room in Ethan's house, waking up to the sound of Noah's laughter and the smell of coffee, falling asleep to the quiet sounds of a house that felt lived in instead of just survived in. She told herself it was temporary, just until she felt strong enough to face her own life again. But truthfully, she didn't want to leave. Here, in this house that wasn't hers, with these people who were slowly becoming essential to her, she felt less alone than she had in years. A week after the funeral, Ethan knocked on the guest room door after Noah had gone to bed. "Can we talk?" he asked. Lena set down the book she'd been pretending to read. "Sure." He sat on the edge of the bed, leaving space between them. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to be honest about how you feel about it." "Okay." "The trust money. It's yours, completely. No strings attached. But I've also been paying for the bakery renovations, the contractors, the equipment, all of it." Lena's stomach tightened. "What? Why would you?" "Because you were grieving, and I didn't want you to have to think about it. Because I wanted to help. Because—" He stopped, searching for words. "Because watching you build something that matters makes me want to be part of it, and this was the only way I knew how." "Ethan, you can't just make decisions like that without asking me." "I know, you're right. I overstepped." He met her eyes. "But I'm not sorry I did it. The work's almost done. The bakery will be ready in 2 weeks. All you have to do is show up and start baking." Lena didn't know whether to be angry or grateful. "How much did you spend? Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters. I don't want to owe you. You don't owe me anything. Consider it my investment in something good. In you." She stood up, pacing the small room. "I can't accept this. It's too much. It's—" "Lena." Ethan stood too, closing the distance between them. "Let me do this, please. Let me help you build something beautiful instead of just fixing the things my father broke." "Why does it matter so much to you?" "Because you matter to me." The words hung in the air between them. "Because somewhere in the middle of trying to make amends for the past, I fell in love with who you are now, with your strength and your stubbornness, and the way you refuse to give up even when everything is falling apart." Lena's heart was pounding. "Ethan, I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I'm just asking you to let me be part of your life in whatever way you're comfortable with. Friend, business partner, whatever you need. What if what I need is more than that?" He went very still. "Then I'm yours, however you want me." Lena closed the space between them and kissed him. It wasn't like their first kiss 12 years ago, fumbling and eager and full of teenage certainty. This was slower, deeper, weighted with grief and hope and the accumulated weight of everything they'd been through. When they pulled apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I won't leave again," he whispered. "I promise." "I know. I believe you." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet of the guest room. Two people who'd found their way back to each other through loss and time and sheer stubborn hope. Outside, the city hummed with its usual noise. Inside, something new was beginning, fragile and uncertain, but real. The morning after their kiss, Lena woke up alone in the guest room with sunlight streaming through the curtains and the distant sound of Noah's voice drifting up from downstairs. For a moment, she let herself just lie there, feeling the unfamiliar sensation of something close to contentment. Then reality crashed back in. Her mother was dead. She'd kissed Ethan Cole, and in 2 weeks she was supposed to open a bakery she hadn't even seen the finished renovations for. She got dressed and went downstairs to find Ethan making pancakes while Noah sat at the counter, swinging his legs and explaining in elaborate detail why Triceratops were better than Stegosaurus. "Morning," Ethan said when he saw her, and there was something different in his voice, warmer, more certain. "Hungry?" "Starving, actually." Noah looked up from his dinosaur debate. "Dad makes the best pancakes. He puts chocolate chips in them even though he's not supposed to.
I never said I wasn't supposed to, Ethan protested.
I said, you're not supposed to have them every day. That's basically the same thing. Lena slid onto a stool beside Noah, watching Ethan flip pancakes with the practiced ease of someone who'd learned to be both mother and father. He caught her looking and smiled, and she felt something warm unfold in her chest. They ate breakfast together like a family, which was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. Noah chattered between bites about his upcoming field trip to the Natural History Museum, and Ethan reminded him 3 times to actually eat his food instead of just talking about dinosaurs. It was ordinary and domestic, and everything Lena hadn't let herself want, because wanting things had always felt too dangerous. After breakfast, Ethan drove Noah to school and came back to find Lena doing dishes in his kitchen. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know, but I'm staying in your house, eating your food, and you paid for my entire bakery renovation without asking. The least I can do is wash some plates." Ethan came to stand beside her at the sink. "About that. The bakery. Do you want to see it? The contractors finished yesterday." Lena's hands stilled in the soapy water. "It's done?" "Yeah. And I hope you'll like what we did with it. But if you don't, if anything isn't what you wanted, we can change it." 20 minutes later, they were standing outside the storefront that would become Lena's bakery. From the street, it looked transformed. The windows had been replaced, the old peeling paint covered with a soft cream color that made the whole building look clean and welcoming. Above the door, there was a space waiting for a sign. "What are you going to call it?" Ethan asked. Lena had thought about this for years, turning names over in her mind during slow shifts at the restaurant. "Brooks and Crumb, after my mom's maiden name. I want her to be part of it, even if she's not here to see it." She'd love that. Inside, Lena stopped breathing. The space had been completely transformed. The floors were new hardwood, warm and golden. The walls were painted a soft white with exposed brick along one side. The kitchen equipment was professional grade and gleaming, commercial ovens, mixers, prep stations, everything she'd need to actually run a real bakery. Display cases ran along the front, empty now but ready to be filled. And by the windows, there were small tables with mismatched chairs that somehow worked perfectly together. "Ethan, this is..." Her voice broke. "This is exactly what I imagined. How did you..." "You told me. That day we walked through the empty space, you described every detail and I tried to make it real." He watched her move through the space, touching the counters, running her hands along the display cases. "There's more. Come see the kitchen." The kitchen was a baker's dream. Everything was exactly where it should be, laid out with a logic that suggested someone had actually thought about workflow and efficiency. There was a cooling rack system, a proofing cabinet, storage that would keep flour and sugar dry and organized. In the corner, there was even a small office space with a desk and filing cabinets. "I don't know what to say," Lena whispered. "You don't have to say anything. Just use it. Build what you wanted to build." She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you doing all this? And don't tell me it's just guilt or making amends. This is more than that." Ethan crossed the kitchen to stand in front of her. "Because when I look at you, I see someone who refused to let the world make her small. Someone who survived things that would have broken most people and came out the other side still believing in dreams. And I need to be part of that. I need to help build something good instead of just tearing things down the way my father taught me to." "I'm scared," Lena admitted, "of failing, of this not working, of letting you invest so much in me and then disappointing you." "You couldn't disappoint me if you tried. And even if the bakery fails, which it won't, you'll have tried. That's more than most people ever do." They stood in the gleaming kitchen, surrounded by the physical manifestation of a dream Lena had carried for over a decade, and she let herself believe it was real, that this could actually be her life. "I need to start ordering supplies," she said, wiping her eyes. "Flour, yeast, all the ingredients. And I need to test recipes, figure out what I'm actually going to sell. And the sign, I need to get the sign made, and business licenses, and one thing at a time." Ethan smiled. "You've got 2 weeks before you plan to open. We can handle all of it." Over the next 10 days, Lena threw herself into getting the bakery ready. She spent hours in the kitchen testing recipes, adjusting ratios, burning batch after batch of croissants, until she finally got them right. Ethan showed up every evening after work to taste test her experiments, offering honest feedback even when it meant telling her the sourdough needed more time or the chocolate cake was too dry. Noah came sometimes too, appointed as the official kid taste tester. He took his job very seriously, making pronouncements about which cookies were pretty good and which ones were really super good with the grave authority of a professional food critic. "This one's the best," he declared one evening, holding up a chocolate chip cookie that was still warm from the oven. "You should make like 1,000,000 of these." "Noted," Lena said, ruffling his hair. "I'll put you in charge of quality control." "What's quality control?" "It means you get to eat cookies and tell me if they're good enough." Noah's eyes went wide. "That's a real job?" "The most important job there is." Rachel stopped by one afternoon, her eyes widening when she saw the finished space. "Holy shit, Lena. This is incredible." "Language," Lena said automatically, then laughed. "Sorry, I've been spending too much time with a 6-year-old.
Is Ethan's kid? Rachel walked around the bakery, taking everything in. So you two are actually together now? Like, for real? I think so. Maybe. It's complicated. Life's always complicated. The question is whether it's worth it. Lena thought about Ethan showing up at the hospice center, about him holding her while she cried, about the way he'd built this entire space from her half-formed descriptions and made it real. Yeah, it's worth it.
"Good, because I haven't seen you smile this much in the entire time I've known you." Rachel paused by the display cases. "When do you open?" 4 days. I'm terrified. You're going to kill it, and I'm taking that opening day off work so I can be first in line." The sign went up 2 days before opening, Brooks and Crumb in elegant script, with a small illustration of a wheat stalk. Lena stood on the sidewalk and stared at it until Ethan came up beside her. "It's perfect," she said. "You're perfect." "I'm really not. I burned 3 batches of bread this morning, and I'm pretty sure I've forgotten how to talk to customers after years of just being a waitress." "You'll remember. And even if you don't, people will come for the bread and stay because you care about what you're doing." Ethan took her hand. "You've got this." The night before opening, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in what was still technically the guest room, but had started to feel like hers, listening to the house settle around her. Around midnight, there was a soft knock on the door. "You awake?" Ethan asked. "Yeah." He came in and sat on the edge of the bed. "I was thinking we should talk about something." Lena's stomach tightened. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. It's just, you've been staying here for almost 3 weeks now, and I like having you here. Noah likes having you here, but I don't want you to feel obligated to stay just because it's easier than figuring out what comes next." "What if I don't want to figure out what comes next? What if I want to stay?" Ethan's expression softened. "Then stay. For as long as you want. Forever, if that's what you decide." Forever's a big word. "I know. And I'm not asking you to commit to forever right now. I'm just saying, the option is there. The guest room can become your room. You can keep your apartment or give it up.
Whatever feels right." Lena reached out and took his hand. "Ask me again in a few months, after I know whether the bakery is going to survive, after we've had time to figure out what we actually are to each other. Then I'll give you a real answer." "That's fair." Ethan brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "For what it's worth, I already know what we are. We're 2 people who found each other twice, and I'm not letting you go again. Even if I burn all the bread tomorrow? Even then. Though I'm hoping you won't, because Noah is very invested in those chocolate chip cookies." Opening day arrived with a clear sky and temperatures just cool enough that people might actually want coffee and fresh bread. Lena arrived at the bakery at 4 in the morning, her hands shaking as she unlocked the door. The pre-dawn silence of the empty space felt holy somehow, like she was standing at the beginning of something sacred. She turned on the ovens and got to work. Sourdough first, the loaves she'd been perfecting for 2 weeks, then chocolate croissants, pain au chocolat, the kind her mother had always loved but could never afford. Cinnamon rolls, focaccia, olive bread, everything she'd been dreaming about making for years. By 7, the bakery smelled like heaven. By 8, when she unlocked the front door, there was already a line of people waiting outside. Rachel was first, true to her word,
followed by a dozen neighbors who'd been watching the renovations with curiosity. Then more people came, drawn by the smell and the word of mouth that traveled fast in tight-knit neighborhoods. Lena moved through the morning in a daze, selling bread and pastries, making change, answering questions about where she'd learned to bake. "My mom taught me," she found herself saying over and over. "She was the one who made me believe I could do this." Around 10, Ethan arrived with Noah. The kid made a beeline for the display case, pressing his face against the glass. "You made so much stuff," Noah said. "Can I have everything?" "You can have one thing," Ethan corrected. "Choose wisely." Noah debated seriously between a chocolate croissant and a cinnamon roll before settling on the croissant. He took a bite and made an exaggerated sound of pleasure that made the other customers laugh. "It's really super good," he announced to the bakery at large. "My friend Lena made it." Ethan caught Lena's eye across the counter and mouthed, "I'm proud of you." She had to turn away before she started crying in front of her customers. The bakery sold out by 2 in the afternoon. Lena stood in the empty space, looking at the bare shelves and the cash register full of money she'd earned herself, and felt something shift inside her chest. This was real. She'd actually done it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Dinner at our place tonight? We're celebrating." Lena typed back, "Our place?" "Yeah. If you want it to be." She looked around the bakery one more time. Her bakery, built from dreams and trust money and the help of a man who'd spent 12 years trying to find his way back to her. Then she locked up and headed to what she was finally ready to call home. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Lena woke up at 3:30 every morning, baked until mid-afternoon, then came home to Ethan and Noah. She moved her things from her old apartment gradually, a box at a time, until the guest room really did become hers. Some nights she and Ethan slept separately, still figuring out the boundaries of what they were building. Other nights she'd find him in the doorway, asking quietly if she wanted company, and she'd pull back the covers and answer. The bakery thrived. People came back daily, started ordering custom cakes for birthdays, asked if she'd consider catering events. Lena hired her first employee, a culinary school student named Maya, who was eager to learn and didn't mind the early hours. Then a second, an older woman named Patricia, who'd been a baker herself before arthritis made the kneading too difficult. "You're building something real here," Patricia told her one morning, watching the line of customers snake out the door. "Something that matters to people." 2 months after opening, Ethan took Lena to see Reeves Commons. The community housing development was nearly finished, 3 buildings arranged around a central courtyard with a playground and community garden. The architecture was beautiful and functional, exactly the kind of sustainable, affordable housing Marcus Reeves had envisioned. "We're naming the courtyard after him," Ethan said as they walked through the space. "The Marcus Reeves Memorial Garden. Sarah approved the design." "It's beautiful. He would have been proud." "I hope so." Ethan stopped at a building directory mounted near the entrance. "There's something else I wanted to show you." He led her to the ground floor of the center building, to a corner space with huge windows looking out on the courtyard. The inside was still unfinished, bare walls, concrete floors, but Lena could see the potential immediately. "What is this?" "A commercial space. We built it into the development for a community amenity, somewhere residents could walk to for coffee or groceries or whatever they needed." Ethan turned to face her. "I was hoping you'd consider opening a second location here. Nothing huge, just a small satellite of Brooks and Crumb. Somewhere the families living here could get fresh bread without having to travel across the city." Lena walked through the empty space, her mind already filling it with display cases and ovens and the smell of fresh bread. Ethan, this is huge. I barely have the first location running smoothly." "I know, and if it's too much, if the timing's not right, we'll find someone else. But I wanted to offer it to you first. He stopped, searching for words. "I wanted to give you the chance to be part of something Marcus started, to help feed the community he was trying to build. Can I think about it?" "Take all the time you need." That night, Lena lay awake thinking about the empty space in Reeves Commons, about all the people who'd live there and might want somewhere close to buy bread for their kids' sandwiches or pastries for Sunday breakfast. She thought about her mother, who'd always believed in helping your neighbors, in being part of a community instead of just existing beside one. By morning, she'd made her decision. "I want to do it," she told Ethan over coffee. "The second location,
but I need your help figuring out how to scale up production without losing quality. Ethan's smile was brilliant. We can do that. I know people who can help. The second location opened 6 months later, smaller than the original, but perfectly suited to the neighborhood. Lena hired 3 more employees, including a single mother from the housing development who needed flexible hours and turned out to have a gift for decorating cakes. The space became exactly what Ethan had hoped, a gathering place, somewhere families could afford to treat themselves without breaking the bank. Sarah Reeves came to the opening, bringing her teenage daughter. She walked through the space with tears in her eyes, touching the plaque on the wall that explained how Marcus's vision had made this community possible. He would have loved this, Sarah said to Lena. All of it. The housing, the garden, this bakery feeding the people who live here. This is what he wanted to build. I'm honored to be part of it. Sarah squeezed her hand. Take care of Ethan. He's a good man, even if it took him a while to figure out how to be one. I will. I am. A year and a half after their reunion at Rosewoods, Lena and Ethan were sitting in the courtyard of Reeves Commons, watching Noah play on the playground with kids from the housing development. It was a Saturday afternoon, warm and clear, the kind of day that felt stolen from somewhere better than Philadelphia had any right to be. I've been thinking, Ethan said. That sounds dangerous. Probably. He took her hand. I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next for us. Lena's heart started beating faster. Okay. Noah asked me the other day when you were going to officially be his second mom. He said his friend Jacob has 2 moms and he wants to know when he gets 2 parents again. What did you tell him? That I was working on it. Ethan turned to face her fully. Lena, I'm not good at this. I've never been good at saying the right thing at the right time. But I know that I love you. I know that coming home to you every day is the best part of my life. I know that watching you build something beautiful from nothing makes me believe I can be better than I was. Ethan, let me finish, please. He took a breath. I know it hasn't been that long. I know we're still figuring out what we are to each other. But I also know that I don't want to spend another day without being sure you're going to be there the next one. So I'm asking, will you marry me? Will you let me be your family, officially, legally, in every way that matters? Lena felt tears streaming down her face. You're sure? You're absolutely sure this is what you want? I've never been more sure of anything. She thought about the girl she'd been 12 years ago, heartbroken and abandoned, and certain she'd never trust anyone again. She thought about the woman she'd become, stronger, harder, someone who'd learned to survive alone. And then she thought about the person she was now, someone who'd learned that strength didn't mean refusing help, that surviving wasn't the same as living. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. Ethan pulled her into his arms, and across the playground, Noah saw them and started jumping up and down, shouting, She said yes! I told you she would. Did you tell the entire playground I was going to propose? Ethan called out. Jacob said I should. He said it's important to have witnesses. Lena laughed through her tears, and Ethan kissed her while a dozen kids they didn't know cheered from the playground equipment. It was messy and public, and nothing like the proposal she might have imagined years ago. It was perfect. They got married 4 months later, in the courtyard of Reeves Commons, with both bakery locations providing the cake and bread for the reception. It was small, just close friends, Noah serving as ring bearer with enormous pride, Sarah Reeves in the front row crying happy tears. Rachel was Lena's maid of honor, making jokes about how she'd always known they'd end up together, even though she'd literally met Ethan twice. Patricia from the bakery caught the bouquet and announced she was too old for that nonsense, then kept it anyway. When Ethan kissed his bride, Noah cheered louder than anyone, and Lena thought about her mother, who wasn't there to see it, but whose dream of Lena building something beautiful had led to this moment. The bakeries continued to grow. A year after the wedding, Lena opened a 3rd location, then a 4th. She hired a business manager to help handle the expansion, and she started teaching baking classes on Sunday mornings for kids from the community housing developments. Noah attended every single class, proudly telling everyone that his mom was the best baker in Philadelphia. Ethan scaled back his hours at Cole Architecture, taking on fewer projects so he could spend more time with his family. He started a foundation in Marcus Reeves's name, funding sustainable housing projects across the country. Sometimes he'd come home frustrated by bureaucracy or setbacks,
And Lena would remind him that changing systems took time, that doing the right thing was rarely easy. "You sound like you're talking about more than architecture," he said one night. "Maybe I am. Maybe I'm talking about us, about how we took something broken and built it into something good, even though it wasn't easy, and we messed up a lot along the way." 5 years after the night at Rosewoods, when their paths had collided again, Lena stood in the original Brooks and Crumb location, watching the sunrise through the front windows. The ovens were warming up, the bread dough was rising, and in a few hours the space would fill with customers and conversation and the ordinary magic of people gathering around good food. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Noah wants to know if you're making the chocolate chip cookies today. Apparently he promised his entire third-grade class you would." Lena typed back, "Of course I am. Tell him I'm making extra." She set down her phone and got to work, her hands moving through the familiar motions of measuring and mixing. The dough felt alive under her palms, full of potential and promise. In a few hours it would transform into something that would sustain people, that would make them happy, that would give them a reason to come together. That's what she'd built, in the end. Not just a business, not just a dream realized, but a place where transformation was possible, where flour and water could become bread, where grief could become growth, where two people who'd been broken apart could find their way back together and build something stronger than what they'd lost. Lena pulled the first loaves from the oven, golden and perfect, crackling as they cooled. She thought about her mother, about Marcus Reeves, about all the people whose losses and dreams had shaped the life she was living now. She thought about Ethan and Noah, probably sitting at the breakfast table right now arguing about whether dinosaurs could have survived if they'd learned to bake bread. And she thought about the girl she'd been at 18, standing outside a dorm room kissing a boy who promised forever before vanishing into 12 years of silence. That girl would never have believed this life was possible, that heartbreak could lead to something better, that the boy who left could become a man worth keeping, that dreams deferred weren't dreams destroyed. But here she was, standing in a bakery she'd built with her own hands and a trust fund reclaimed from decades of secrets. Here she was, married to someone who'd learned how to stay. Here she was, feeding her community and raising a child who wasn't hers by birth, but was absolutely hers by choice. The door chimed as Maya arrived for her shift, bringing with her the cold morning air and a smile that said she was exactly where she wanted to be. "Morning, boss. What are we making today?" Lena looked around her bakery, her dream made real, her second chance transformed into a daily practice of showing up and doing the work, and believing that good things could grow from broken soil. "Everything," she said. "We're making everything." And she got to work.